I'm curious if that's comparable to this sort of world, this culture of toxic fandom, where like if you make a movie, especially if you make a superhero movie, like you have great intentions, but there are always going to be a small yet vocal group of people there can kind of just be toxic.
I understand what you're saying, but when it comes to fans, it is a fan's right to have whatever opinion they want to have. And people are going to be upset because, especially when you're talking about books or games, because you're never going to be the exact person who they had in their head or who they played on Witcher 3, for example. I don't necessarily consider that toxic. I just consider that passionate.
Hey everyone, Merlin here. I wanted to talk about a problem that exists in the corner of the Star Wars and greater pop culture fanbase known by many as the fandom menace. It's a problem that bothers me because it's the kind of thing that our detractors can and often do use to cast us in a bad light. It's this tendency to become so comfortable with a certain narrative that we tend to be very resistant to changing our view when presented with new facts. I noticed on Twitter that there was a story about how Tony Gilroy had called out toxic Star Wars fans in an interview. The reaction was what you would expect, and to be honest, I reacted the same way. I was like, oh, here we go again. But someone had mentioned that you should actually watch the full video because he had actually been taken out of context. I did, and not only did he not do what they said, but he was actually very complimentary of the fans, in a similar way to Henry Cavill in that other interview. And then I took a look at a video by WDW Pro on this subject, and I was deeply disappointed in what I found. The actual interview occurred on Deadline, but a lot of clickbait troll websites covered it. And the one that they were reading from in the video was from the Direct. Star Wars producer calls out toxic fandom attacking Kathleen Kennedy.
Looking at the comments that Kennedy sees every day, Gilroy was shocked, I tell you, by what he saw happen during his work on Rogue One, A Star Wars Story. It was shocking on Rogue One because I didn't really have any exposure. When Rogue happened and everything that happened, I was really blown back by what was going on, and this that I hadn't paid attention to. So I knew about it when I came back. I knew what to expect. Noting that this love is something that you really have to pay attention to. These are deep words out of Tony Gilroy today. Guys, you need to pay attention to customers. Ooh, thank you, boss. So my attitude has been, and the attitude of the show is, as far out there as we get, and as much as we bend the tone in the idea, we can never, ever be cynical about it. We can't be cynical about destroying things, folks. We have to take it more seriously than anybody's ever taken it. We're never winking. We're never kidding. Please tell me that was
is that why Andor wasn't any fun and nobody watched?
This is so bad. No wonder.
This is something.
Taking things back to Kennedy, he made it clear that he doesn't envy the job she has to do. KK's job is like, you don't want to be Kathy ever up on the internet. It's just what she goes through and it's been on for years. This man can't English, apparently.
So they read through the article, reading Gilroy's quotes in the least charitable way possible. I'm not saying they were trying to dishonestly portray his words, but it really goes to show how much of a difference there can be between an actual interview and a transcript of that interview. The tone and the meaning can be totally manipulated. It certainly didn't help that they went in assuming that he was disparaging the fan base. When you start from that assumption, it's hard to take out of context quotes and not make someone look bad.
The Star Wars universe, those fans out there, the internet, anytime you get into something like this, you're fighting against that even before you've written a word, you know. And the pressure on you as a writer, I'm just curious, do you care? Does it bother you, or does it energize you to do right by them as well, or what they expect, or take them into a direction they didn't expect?
It was shocking on Rogue because I didn't really have any exposure. When Rogue happened and everything that happened, I was really blown back by what was going on and this thing that I hadn't paid attention to. So I knew about it when I came back. I knew what to expect. You have to realize about that community that their passion is they love this thing so much. The hardcore, deepest. You have within that community, you have Shiites and Sunnis and Kurds, and you have all kinds of people who have different, but their love of the show and their love of what it means to them is something that you really have to pay attention to. So my attitude has been, and the attitude of the show is, as far out there as we get, and as much as we bend the tone and the idea of what to do, we could never, ever be cynical about it. We have to take it more seriously than anybody's ever taken it. We're never winking, we're never kidding it. And so we have this mix of people who know nothing about Star Wars on our show, and then we have a bunch of people on the show that are huge nerds, and it's the marriage of knowledge and history mixed with a real ambition to take it someplace else, with hopefully respect for. I want the respect of that audience. Now, I do read what they, there's no way of doing it and not being controversial.
Yeah.
There's no way. It's impossible. And Kathy's job is you don't want to be Kathy and ever open the internet. It's just, what she goes through and it's been on for years,
This took me by surprise, as WDW Pro is normally very thorough with his information and tries to deal with his topics in a factual manner. But here, it just felt like he was dishonestly crafting a narrative. After the video, I posted the following comment. It's a long comment, but I was basically explaining to him that if he had actually watched the actual interview instead of just going through the clickbait articles, he would have found out that Gilroy was actually saying the opposite of what they thought he was saying. And that, doing this kind of thing can damage his credibility. He responds, "Here's an idea. Tell me where we misquote what was said. We literally read the articles, criticized the idea that KK takes unfair heat, and suggest that the defense of her is an attempt to secure a second season following the writer's strike. What if that is incorrect?" So I responded back saying he should have watched the video because everyone who did watch it had a very different interpretation from what his was, and that the only reason he even mentioned Kathleen Kennedy was because the interviewer specifically asked him about it, and that he was as pragmatic and diplomatic as he could possibly be. It's amazing to me that he would just double down like that. He could have just said, "You know what, we went back and watched the video, and you were right. We made a mistake, we'll try not to do that again." I noticed a little later that there were many more comments taking him to task for this. Which is probably why he posted the following pinned comment. "Hey all, we heard your critique that we didn't do a good enough job delineating between what Gilroy said and how the media spun it. We agree with you, and we will remedy the issue on Saturday in a video. We still believe defending Kennedy against unfair criticism is unwarranted. We don't necessarily disagree with anything we said, but we could have done better to make that distinction. Thank you for your feedback. We listen." The video in which he supposedly addresses this was probably a live stream that was locked behind a paywall shortly afterwards, and I wasn't able to find it. I was pleasantly surprised that he had acknowledged the issue after having been so dismissive of my comment on it. But it still bothered me that it was the sort of non-apology where he stands by everything he said and basically refuses to admit any wrongdoing or mistake. In contrast, a content creator that I like, that I did almost expect this from, was Ryan Kinnell at RK Outpost. No offense to Ryan, but he has this very aggressive shoot first, ask questions later style. And I kind of expected him to just barrel in, just shooting with both barrels, and just completely destroy Gilroy. But to my surprise, he didn't take the bait. He actually did his due diligence and explained that Gilroy had been taken out of context.
But then I found something else out. As I was reading through this article, saw other people talking about it, and watched the very same video that this article is referencing, I realized that, you know what? The media has also been lying about Star Wars fans for a long time, and it looks like this is yet another media lie. This article, I think the headline's incredibly deceptive, because in reality, Tony Gilroy, who's the person that they're talking about in this article, when you watch the video, he's incredibly complimentary of Star Wars fans. He says they have such a passion, they have a love, they care about this stuff so much. And when he goes about creating, he keeps that in mind and wants to do right by them and wants them to accept what he puts out. But this is the headline that the mainstream media is running with. I don't think what Tony Gilroy said was that. I don't think he was slamming toxic fans. Did he mention that Kathleen Kennedy gets a lot of criticism just like everyone else because so many people care about this thing? That's exactly what he said. But did he say that it's toxic, or did he say that these people care about Star Wars so much, they love this thing, and that when he creates things, he wants to do right and make those people happy? Like, holy shit. I was so ready to make another video about a Lucasfilm creator slamming Star Wars fans, but at the end of the day, I just don't think that's what this was. I think this is the case of the mainstream media desperately trying to convince people that that's what he said, when in reality, he said that no, passionate fans, it's because they love this thing. And a little aside about Kathleen Kennedy and that it might be rough for her on the internet because there's been so many decisions that people don't like. That's certainly true. But I don't think that Tony Gilroy was attacking toxic Star Wars fans or anything like that.
I think the thing that I found most disappointing about WDW Pro's video is that one of the things he always talks about is the reason Disney never course corrects on any of the terrible stuff they do is because they don't want to admit they're wrong. And now he's basically guilty of the same thing. Now, I understand this isn't the biggest problem in the world. Everyone has bad takes. But I believe this is an indication of a bigger problem. And I'm not trying to single out WDW Pro. He's just one of the content creators that I'm talking about that do this kind of thing. But, you know, the problem is that these content creators have value for me and many others because we believe they're speaking the truth. Because they have our trust. But if they get something wrong, worse, get something wrong because they were lazy and complacent, and then don't bother to make it right afterwards, how easy is it going to be to trust them the next time they report something? Because if I wanted someone that would just tell me what I want to hear, I'd still be watching Collider, or worse, John Campea. Woke! Woke! If this fan movement, called the Fandom Menace, or the Fellowship, or Comicsgate, or whatever else you want to call it, is to have any lasting impact, the people in it have to hold themselves to a higher standard, and make sure they get it right every time. And if they don't get it right every time, at least make it right afterwards, and own their mistakes. Otherwise, we're just the same as the shill access media, except on the other side. Hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, give it a like. If you didn't, give it a dislike. Be sure to subscribe and even do that thing with the bell. And remember, folks, no matter where you're going, there you are.